According to researchers, mass shooters in the U.S. tend to fit a specific profile. University professors Jillian Peterson and James Densley compiled a database of detailed life histories on 180 U.S. mass shooters to look for early warning signs. They found that the typical suspect in these attacks has early childhood trauma that was left unresolved. That trauma then grows into negative feelings of isolation and self-loathing. Those feelings then build into suicidal ideologies, which can lead a disgruntled person to look into previous mass shootings and attackers. The final key to these series of warning signs is access to a gun. In terms of demographics, the Violence Project database finds that from 1996 through now, 97% of U.S. mass shooters are male. 81% of the K-12 school shooters have been white. Jillian Peterson joins us now from St. Paul, Minnesota. She's the executive director of the Violence Prevention Project Research Center. Thank you so much for being with us. You've looked at mass shooters and the typical profile. How would you say what we know about the shooter in this case of the assassination attempt on former President Trump fits in with what your research has shown you?
You know, it's early and we're still waiting for more facts to emerge. But what we do know is the shooter was young, around 20, which is very typical for mass shooters to be kind of late teens, early 20s. He was a white male, also very typical, who used an AR-15, which is the most common weapon used in these shootings in recent years. It appears that he was socially isolated through school, according to the reports that are coming out, which is also quite common. What we don't know is if he fits other patterns. So, for example, if he was showing warning signs, if he was in crisis, if he was leaking his plans or telling other people that he was thinking about this. But just based on the early reports we have coming out, he does seem to fit this general profile of a public mass shooter.
And you and I have talked about this before in other contexts. Remind me again, and we want to be careful with, you already have been, but with trying to draw bright lines of connection. A lot of politicians have done that, and it's the wrong thing to do. We're just trying to understand the facts we do know and how they may fit in another context. Given what you know about mass shooters, what is the object of their actions? Why do they act out in this way?
So if we look at mass shooters collectively, so we've studied around 200 of them, we see a few different motivations that drive their behavior. One is they are angry at something. They have this grievance with the world, and a mass shooting is a way to get that grievance out into the public. They're designed to be public spectacles that get their anger out. So whether that's anger at school or at a boss or at work or church, or in this case, former President Trump. Two, they are looking to make the history books. They want to go viral. They want their name to be known. Typically, these are young men who are not known or seen in other aspects of their life. And this is this way for them to be seen for doing this horrific thing. And then third, they are designed to be final acts. So perpetrators don't plan to survive these types of shootings. They know they're either going to be killed by the police, they'll spend their life in prison, or in many cases, they kill themselves. So there's an element of kind of hopelessness and suicidality to them as well.
In terms of that question of spectacle, does it necessarily have to be the case, or I guess what I wonder is, based on your research, does politics ever sort in that? In other words, if you were trying to create a spectacle, and based on what I know about political violence, sometimes the shooters, John Hinckley was trying to create a spectacle because of his views about Jodie Foster. They really didn't have anything to do with politics. The spectacle was quite high in his priority matrix. So how does the desire for spectacle match, or maybe not match at all, with the political motivation some people might see?
What we do know about these shooters is that this is complicated. I think our instinct is to pull out something, right, and say, oh, this is mental illness, or this is political hate, or this is racism, or whatever it is. We tend to sort of want to grab onto something to make it make sense. What we've learned from studying these is this is incredibly complex, that people who do this, they want to be famous, they're suicidal, they're angry, but a lot of that anger comes from kind of self-loathing and self-hatred initially, and then it gets turned out. A lot of times they're radicalized online. We don't know if that's the case here. A lot of times they study previous perpetrators. who have done this sort of thing. Again, we don't know if that's the case here, but we'll see. So politics is certainly at play. It's hard to say kind of how big of a role it is here.
And finally, Jillian, for anybody who sees some of these warning signs, help us, remind us again of sort of what you all in your research have found helps get at people who are in crisis before it goes too far.
Yeah, we know this is something that we all have to tackle together. I think it's easy to point at politicians and get frustrated when things aren't happening at a policy level. And certainly there's things we need to happen at a policy level. But there's things that we as individuals and as institutions like schools and churches and workplaces can do. So train ourselves in crisis intervention and suicide prevention, know the warning signs, know who do you report to when you're concerned about somebody. It may be the police, or it may be somebody at your school or your church or your workplace. Have teams built, threat assessment teams or care teams that can investigate and look into these individuals, and then making sure individuals who are in crisis don't have easy access to weapons that they could use. And so this is a complex problem with a lot of different solutions. The good news is when we start piling those solutions on top of each other, we're hopeful that we'll really see some change.
Jillian Peterson, thank you so much, and thank you for your work.
Thank you for having me.